Hello and welcome everyone. We'll uh, we'll wait a minute or two as we're expecting quite a few people this evening, and then we'll make a start. But thank you all those who are here on time or even early. It's always appreciable. Hi, I can see people saying hi in the chat.
Lots, yes.
It's already filling up. Yeah, just one piece of housekeeping while you're here. If you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A. And so we'll have the chat for chat and Q&A for questions, and then we can make sure they're all in the same place. Hello, hello again. Welcoming more people, 130 here already. It's great numbers. Wonderful to see so many people arriving for this evening's event. Good evening, everyone. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll kick off. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, numbers are still going up, so we're up to around about 150 in the house already. So we'll just give it until 2 minutes past the half hour, and then we'll make a start. Okay, so time to go. Thank you everyone for coming this evening, and a special thanks to International House for setting up this webinar along with Cambridge. Many of you will no doubt know that what we now know as the CELTA actually originated in International House in their school in Covent Garden back in the early 1960s, where they needed an intensive 100-hour training course to make sure that they had sufficient teachers to cover all the signups they had for their classes. And so Cambridge was very fortunate to take on the responsibilities of managing the CELTA from the 1980s, but it is quite fitting that we are here with our natural partners of International House to celebrate teacher development and teacher training. With that in mind, we have some wonderful teacher trainers here to walk us through today's session. I'm not going to talk for too long. I just wanted to welcome you all. And my dear colleague, Ben, from the UK, but he lives in Prague. He says it's quite chilly there. He has a wonderful array of different types of presentations and sessions that I've already been lucky enough to sit into. So I shall pass over to Ben for our first session.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And hello, everyone. So, yes, my name is Ben, and I'm a professional learning and development specialist at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. I've been working in ESL now for just over 15 years, mainly as an English teacher in the Czech Republic, where I'm based. But during that time, I've also worked as a teacher in Jordan, in Libya, and Saudi Arabia. In addition to that, I've also worked as a CELTA trainer in the past. So I was quite pleased to be asked to present to you today. Now, today, we're going to look at some of the basics of lesson planning. And I thought that perhaps before we get into the main part of my presentation, I'd like to find out how you feel about lesson planning. So I've got something which I would like you to take part in, a little poll. I have created a Slido for you. You can join the Slido by using the QR code on the screen, or by joining the using the link which I have just sent you in the chat box. So please, could you tell me which of these descriptions best describes how you think about lesson planning? Is it a detailed roadmap? So clear instructions for you to follow? Um, is it a flexible guide? A time-consuming process, a creative process perhaps, or maybe just something that's necessary in your teaching context? I see people's opinions seem quite split. There seems to be a bit of a competition there going on between something being that's very detailed and I imagine quite prescriptive versus a more flexible guide to teaching. And it's interesting to see that it being a creative process is is up there as well. Okay, so I see at the moment we've got 89 answers. So I'll give you just a little bit more time. Okay, so I think we can see that a large number of people see planning as creating a detailed roadmap. And I think there is something to be said for planning thoroughly, especially taking in or bearing in mind our teaching context, our learners' needs, their preferences, but also obviously taking into account our lesson aims when we're planning. If we have a clear lesson aim when we plan a lesson, that can make the planning process not only run much more smoothly, but it helps us create a much more detailed roadmap. I've noticed now that a flexible guide is just there at the top, and I think that's something that we need to bear in mind as well. When we plan a lesson, it's important that we have a clear idea of what we want the lesson to look like, where we want the lesson to go, what we want our students to be able to do at the end of the lesson. But very often, things just happen in the classroom, perhaps things we couldn't anticipate, which mean that we need to be a bit flexible. And I think as long as we have planned well and we've got that clear idea of what we want to achieve, that can help us make principled decisions on the spur of the moment in the classroom to react well to those emergent situations. So even if our lesson turns out not to be the lesson that we had originally planned, it can still be effective in that it helps us meet those lesson aims. Okay, now today I want to look at two main types of lesson plan. Start by looking at a plan for teaching language, by which I mean teaching vocabulary or grammar or perhaps even functional language. And then we'll move on to look at planning for the skills. So for developing those four macro skills, reading or listening, speaking or writing. So let's start with language. So here I've got some basic stages of a language lesson. And you can probably notice I've jumbled them up. So please, in the chat box, which stage do you think should come first from A to G? Good. Lots of B's. So yeah, we need a lead in. Now, I spoke earlier about the importance of having a clear aim for your lesson. And one of the reasons of that is that it can act like a guide for the rest of your planning. But as well as having an overall lesson aim, it's also important to think of stage aims in your planning. If you consider what the aim of your stage is, then first of all, that can confirm in your mind whether you should include that stage in your plan or not. If the stage aim actually isn't related to you achieving your overall aims, then perhaps it might not be necessary to include that in the lesson. But also, if you have a clear stage aim, then that can help you with your selection of activities for that stage. So in a language lesson, I would always make sure to include a lead in because I would want to help set a clear context in which the language is going to be presented. And a lead in could help with that. It would also help activate some of the learners' pre-existing knowledge or their schematic knowledge around the subject, around the topic. And also because, again, depending on our context, but I've often taught adults in language schools, and very often they've been at work all day and they just needed to get their minds working in English mode. And an effective lead-in can help with that. So after a lead-in, what would we include next? Aha, good. I'm seeing quite a few. Oh, I see a little bit actually of a of a variation, but I see lots of G's, and G is the answer that I was looking for. So this particular type of language lesson is called a text-based presentation. And the idea is that we create a lead-in to establish a topic of the lesson, and then we have some kind of receptive skills activity. It could be reading a text, it could be listening to a recorded text. And the idea is that we're exposing the learners to examples of the language we want to look at later in the lesson. But when they first see that, they're not looking at it or listening to it as a source of new language. They're approaching it as a source of reading or listening practice. This, this means that that new language is being contextualized. So hopefully later it should be possible for us to work with that. So after I've introduced the language in a suitable reading or listening task, what would I do? What would I do next? Now there seems to be a bit of a divide here between A and F. Um, I think the next thing to do is to include some kind of noticing task. And by noticing task, I mean some kind of task where we're shifting the learner's attention away from seeing that text as a source of reading or listening practice towards something which contains examples of some language for them to learn. The noticing task could be something as simple as asking the learners to underline or circle examples of a grammatical form in the text, for example. Or if you're going to use the text to teach vocabulary, it could be asking them to underline all of the, let's say, the adjectives which are being used to describe personalities, for example. Um, so just some kind of task where we're shifting the focus of the lesson from skills to language. And then once they have noticed the language, that's when we can move on to the clarification. So with the clarification, that's where I would want to make sure that the learners understand the meaning of the language, the form of the language, and also the pronunciation. Now, depending on your learners, your clarification might want to take more of a meaning focus or a form focus. But I think it's important for us to remember, especially with grammar, very often our learners, if they're at, let's say, intermediate or upper intermediate level, it's likely they've already seen examples of various grammatical forms before. And what we're likely to be doing is we're linking a new meaning to that particular form. So again, you know your learners, you know where they are in their language learning journey, and you can use that to influence your planning choices. If I was going to teach a new meaning of the present perfect to let's say, a low B1 level class, I would probably spend much more time focusing on the meaning than on the form, because I could be fairly sure that they've already seen the form at A2 level. Okay, what would I do after clarification? Okay, so I would then have some form of controlled practice. Now, with controlled practice, the idea is that we're kind of testing our learners to see if they either understand or at least can use the new language. And this is done often in a way where we're isolating either their understanding of the meaning or their understanding of the form. And this is quite, as the name suggests, quite controlled. So in controlled practice, there's very often only one correct answer. That way, we can see if they have understood or internalized the language or not. Next, I would have some form of freer practice. So the idea behind freer practice is that we're allowing the learners to use the new language in a much freer way, in a way which allows them in some way to express themselves. This means that by its very nature, freer practice is a lot more personalized, and it's not really possible to have just one correct answer. With freer practice, we as teachers need to think carefully about how we're going to give feedback to this. Because with the controlled practice, very often there's just one answer. But with freer practice, we want our students to use the language in a free way. We're going to hear lots of different examples of their production, and we've got to think, how are we going to provide feedback to that? It should be noted that with freer practice, it can often be integrated with some form of productive skills practice, because very often it's going to involve either writing or speaking. And so we might want to include some aspect of skills development there, if possible, if we're taking a more integrated approach to teaching language alongside skills. So that's just one basic paradigm of lesson planning. I've got here an example of some material from a course book, and you can scan the QR code if you would like to see it in more detail. I will also put a link to this in the chat so you can open it on your computers if you're on a computer at home. And just for a couple of minutes, I'd like you to look at that material, and do you notice whether or not any of these exercises in here could be used as part of that lesson planning paradigm? Just in case you would like to review those stages, I'll put those in the chat for you as well. So here are the stages. If it's a little bit unclear, I think if you can try using the link, it should help. Okay. I can see a lot of you have noticed that there is the reading task there. And I think this material is a really good example of how very often language and skills are actually combined in the material. If I was looking at this with a view to having more of a skills flavor to my lesson, I would probably make sure to spend more time and devote more time in my lesson plan to the reading, because we can see here that we have an activity that could easily be used as a lead-in. If I wanted to spend more time on the lead-in, if I thought that was appropriate for my teaching context, I could perhaps start with a discussion about the topic, or perhaps I could have some images related to the topic and ask the learners to respond to the images. But then we quite quickly move on to some reading tasks, don't we? And we can see here that there's two different types of reading task. So if I wanted to give this more of a skills flavor, I could definitely spend a bit more time looking at how the learners could actually read in this manner. If I wanted this to be more of a reading lesson, I might look at how they could underline keywords, for example, and then use those keywords to help them find the answers in the text. If, however, I wanted really to focus on the language, I'd still do the reading because I want to present the language in context, but I would then move on to part 6, exercise 6. And if we look here, exercise 6 combines both the noticing task and the clarification. In questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, the learners are asked to find examples of the language, and then beneath that, there's that rule box, which helps to clarify the meaning. There's then some controlled practice, and the controlled practice, as you can see, will only have one correct answer, and it's there to help me as a teacher check that the learners have understood the language. There's then, finally, number 9, an opportunity for freer practice. And we can see here that it's a writing task where the learners are expected to use that target language, but in a way which is much more personalized. I noticed in the chat box somebody said, what about exercise 5? Well, I would argue that exercise 5 here is being used to engender some kind of personal response from the learners to the reading text. This is something which fits much better if you want to have a more skills-focused lesson. And I think if I was using this material, I would definitely use this. But if I was planning with, let's say, limited time, and I needed to get the language done, that's something which perhaps I might want to omit if I would rather focus on that language there. So I hope you can see that part of planning is about deciding what the aim of your lesson is, what the focus of your lesson is, and then allowing that to guide your choices as to what exercises you include in your lesson and which ones you might want to omit. Okay, so that is a good example of a language lesson. Let's just now do the same for a skills lesson. So I think already we know that we need to begin with our lead-in. What might I do next? Okay, so we've got our first task, and if we would normally have, for a first reading or listening task, very often there'd be a sort of gist style task, and that would then be followed by a second reading or listening sub-skill, perhaps reading or listening for specific information. or for inference, for example. Um, what might come next? Ah, well, I think I did notice actually earlier, someone asked, oh, are all these stages necessary when we were looking at language lessons just now? And the answer is not necessarily. It depends on your teaching context, it depends on your aims, and it depends what happens in the lesson as well, how your students react to the material. With this, I would suggest the first thing to do after we've done the reading is to then allow our learners to give some kind of personal response to the text. How do they feel about the text? Next, if that text, whether it's listening or a reading text, if that text is in some way a good example of something that we would like our learners to be able to produce themselves, I would probably then take some time to highlight the features of the text. Because by highlighting those features of the text, it then means that my students, my learners, are are much more aware of what they would need to include when they come to try to produce their own version of the text. Now, this lesson outline here, this lesson plan outline, it is very, very general. And it's actually an example of what we would call integrated skills because we're including reading or listening and then some writing or speaking output. Sometimes in a lesson, we might not have time for this. We might want to focus more on those receptive skills or we might want to focus on the productive skills. So if that's the case, and I want to focus on the receptive skills, in my plan, I would have much more time dedicated to practicing those skills, to developing those skills. And then I would think, well, actually, after that, what do I need? Maybe I only want the learners to give some form of personal response. Maybe I would like a short follow-on speaking task, for example. If, on the other hand, I want more of a productive focus to my lesson, it's likely that I would want to keep the amount of time that the learners are reading or listening and being exposed to that model down to a minimum to give more time for looking at the features of that and then giving my learners some time to produce their own text. So with any lesson plan outline, there's always scope for adaptation and for change or omission. And I think this one is particularly the case. You really need to think what your aims are and to let those aims guide your decisions about what to include and what to omit. So again, we have some material here. And again, I'll give you the link. So here you go. I'll also, just to help you, I'll copy and paste those stages into the chat box. So again, can you see in this material any examples that you of this sort of lesson plan outline being followed that would allow you to incorporate it into this material into such a lesson? Mhm. Yeah, I see lots of you have identified the lead in, and I would say um, arguably it's not just exercise one. Yeah, someone said 1 to 4, and I think I would agree. That's quite a long lead in. And I think as a teacher, I would see that as an opportunity to really try and find out what my students already know about the topic and perhaps what language they already know to be able to talk about the topic. You might have noticed, sorry, that this material was taken from the beginning of a unit, and often at the beginning of units, there's these slightly longer lead-ins to help you, the teacher, really understand what your learners already know, because that will obviously have an impact on what you then do later in your teaching. Okay, so um, just to take a look through this, we've got, yeah, these first four activities or tasks, I would say, um, could easily work as a lead in. And then we've got our first reading activity here. We've got a gist reading activity. So the idea of a gist reading activity is that the learners need to demonstrate that they understand the general idea of the text. We then have some reading for inference. So here, the learners need to do something a bit more challenging. They need to be able to read and match those paragraphs to a comment from somebody talking about each paragraph. So notice we've gone from a sort of a global understanding of the texts to something a lot more specific. Um, Now, in that skills lesson paradigm that we saw just now, uh, we saw how that possibly one way of doing things is to have a productive task which in some way relates to the input that the learners saw at the beginning of the lesson. And here, something slightly different is happening, but we could still use this in a skills focused lesson because the learners have been exposed to the reading text, but there are then some opportunities to practice their speaking afterwards. And one thing I would be tempted to do here would be to turn these tasks into an actual speaking skills part of the lesson. So what I would do is perhaps look at those questions, think what sort of discussions I want my learners to have, and then give them some useful phrases that they could use in having those discussions and actually give them feedback on how well they were able to use the phrases and how well they were able to manage their discussions. So there's a really good opportunity here to do that. And you'll notice that in the material, there's even some examples of the sorts of language that the learners might want to use. So just because we're not asking our learners to produce their own written stories based or like modeled on the text that they have read, we're still getting some productive skills practice out of this material. So I hope this has been useful looking at these two main lesson planning paradigms. Just before we finish, I'd like you to help me summarize this session. So can anyone tell me what you think number one might be? Ah, good. So yeah, make sure you have a clear aim for your lesson. That clear aim will help you when you make your choices later on in your planning. You can always refer back to your aim and think, how will this help me achieve my aim or aims? What about number two? Number two is two words. Ah, So we've got our main lesson aim. Remember, your stage aims should in some way relate to your overall lesson aim. So your stage aim should answer the question, why has this stage been included in your lesson? If you're not sure how to answer it, then that could be a sign that perhaps the stage doesn't need to be in your plan or the stage needs to be changed in some way. Um, and then we've got a few here, 3, 4, and 5. Allow your knowledge of your learners. Good. I'm seeing a few people have needs. Okay, number 4. Abilities and I've seen it a few times. Very good. Preferences to guide your planning decisions. Remember, you know your learners. And with that knowledge of your learners' needs, abilities, and preferences, that can really help you plan your lesson in a way that they're going to find not just useful, but also motivating. And then finally, number 6, don't be afraid to I've put adapt. A few people wrote adjust. I would be happy with that as well. Alter. I've seen alter. That's also good. But all of these are great because as 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 well as we can plan, um, it's really important to respond to emergent situations in the classroom. And as I touched on earlier at the beginning of this session, the uh, the more detailed your plan, the more you've thought about the lesson, and that then means that you've got a much clearer idea of where you want your learners to be at the end, and that can help you make those decisions as you're teaching. So, thank you for your time. Before I hand over, I have included all of the slides from this presentation in a QR code, which I will show you shortly. If you would like some further reading on lesson planning, I've included some publications here from Cambridge and the QR codes that lead you to more information about them. Also, it happens to be World Mental Health Day, and Cambridge have created some online like word games for teachers, linking World Mental Health Day to the teaching profession. So there's a QR code there that you might want to take a look at as well, because obviously for all of us in the teaching profession, we do need to look after our well-being throughout the academic year. So thank you again. If you would like the slides, here is the QR code, and I will put the link to the slides in the chat box now as well. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Ben, for a great session condensed into a short period of time. You covered some essential points. And now it's time to hand over to in-house experts at the International House, Laura and Amanda.
Well, good evening again, lovely teachers. I always get scared when people talk about experts. I sort of think, oh my God, even after 38 years, I feel like I'm still learning stuff. But thank you very much for those lovely words, Simon. Scary, but lovely to hear. So we're going to sort of carry on from Benjamin's sorry, I can't speak English today. Insightful session. Okay. He's given you an absolutely lovely overview with some really important points. And then we're just going to show you the basics. Okay. So we're going to go down the very simple road. All righty. So coming back to the title of our session about friends versus enemies. I just want you to think for a moment, I mean, how do our friends help us in life? So throw some ideas into the chat box, and I'll put my glasses on so I can see them. And the lovely Amanda's going to keep an eye on things. Oh, thank you for your welcome. I can see some familiar names. Very nice, yes. Nice idiom, yes. Lovely, indeed. Very nice indeed. Yes. And I see that the word support came up quite a lot, and it keeps coming up actually. As soon as I think people have stopped writing support, it keeps coming up. And I think that's excellent and very moot to what we're going to cover. Oh, I like that. Soothe our pain and comfort our hearts. That's a very good friend. That's a wonderful friend. Oh, I see somebody from Ben Hur. Well, wonderful. Lovely. But I know you're from all over Egypt, so that's good. Mutual trust, also very, very nice. And there was something about passion, motivation, and encouragement, also really nice words. So that brings us back to the point of, we said we want your lesson plan to be your friend, not your enemy. All right. And when Ben showed at the beginning, sort of different attitudes towards planning, one of the points that came up was the roadmap, which is just as well because, and I will show you why. Just give me a moment. Find my little presentation there. Okay, here we go. So I'm just doing a little shared screen. So where are we? Yes. So allow me to open up. I hope everybody can see that. Is that correct? Everybody can see the first thing. So we said, make your lesson plan your enemy, your enemy, your friend, not your enemy. Maybe I was thinking about something else there. All right. So if we're talking about roadmaps, well, I'm talking about a lesson plan as your destination. Okay. And when we're going somewhere, we like to take our friends with us for support, for guidance, encouragement, motivation. So I'm just going to go through the basics of lesson planning. Now, I know people who have done the CELTA will be like, yeah, we know that. So you can have a quick sleep. Or feel free to add some of your amazing comments. For those of you thinking of doing a CELTA, or not, in the right place to do it at the moment, but maybe thinking about how to better improve your lesson planning, then, feel free to join in. All right, so we have a destination. And our destination, okay, our final destination, is our main aim, isn't it? So, when you're planning, you should start at the end of your plan. All righty. So, what do you want your students to be able to do at the end of the lesson that they couldn't do so well when they walked in the door? All right. Now, I'm not saying that they couldn't do it, but maybe they should, by the end of the lesson, be able to do it a lot better. Okay, so there are lots of ways of talking about aims, objectives. I've probably combined the two to keep things very simple because I'm a great believer in the KISS rule, the keep it short and simple. All righty, so this is the end of my destination, but for planning purposes, we write it at the beginning. All right, so that's my first bit. Now, because it's the present perfect simple and we're talking about experiences, I also need an assistant. So a bit like my assistant driver to get me on my way. All right. So any ideas as to what the assistant might be, i.e. the sub-aim? So my main aim was the present perfect simple to talk about experiences, and I need a sub-aim. So feel free to add your ideas. Yes. Well remembered. Yes. Any guesses to what my sub-aim might be? Oh, nice. Yes, some good ideas coming in. Yes. Okay. Yes, in fact, I didn't write my skills aim, but it could be I shall add to it. Yes. Okay, nice ideas. Okay. So one of my sub-aims could be to revise the past simple tense because I can't do the present perfect simple to talk about experiences effectively if I don't include the past simple. And what I haven't written on my slide is also a skills aim as well, to practice reading for gist and specific information. All right, so you can imagine that part there. All righty, so my assistant drivers, okay, that help me to get on my destination, to revise the past simple and to practice reading for gist and specific information. Okay, could be just one, just could also be just reading for specific information. This all depends on time. All right, and time is always the teacher's enemy. All righty, so on my journey, I need something to put my stuff in, don't I? All right. So there's things I need. Okay, things I need to know about my students, my learners. Who are they? How old are they? What are they interested in? What's their level? Of course, they're all going to be quite different. Some are going to be good at reading, some are going to be good at speaking, some will be good at grammar, some will be good at writing. Oh, blah, 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 blah. We know from experience that, there's no such thing as a homogeneous class where everybody's a similar level. And we also know that they will have had different backgrounds in their learning. Did they, go to a school where they had lots of English lessons? Did they get lots of practice, as in speaking practice, rather than just filling in the gaps, or the evil Egyptian disease of the multiple choice question? I'm quite allergic to those, I have to say. So we need to know who they are, things that they're interested in. You mentioned, Ben mentioned preferences, and some of you also mentioned them. These things are also important. All right, so what else is going in my bag for my journey? Again, what do I think they already know? So there's no point me doing a present perfect simple lesson if I don't believe they know something about the past simple. Otherwise, my lesson is going to die a horrible, painful death. And I don't want that. Otherwise, I'll end up sweating and panicking in my lesson, as many of us have done in our lifetimes. Okay, so more equipment for my bag. Okay. The actual equipment in class. So what kinds of things do we need for our equipment in class? Well, yeah, somebody said multiple intelligences. Now we talk about preferences because the multiple intelligences theory is not really valid anymore. Lovely, good, yes. Okay, what kind of tools? People are saying aids and tools. Oh, yes, nice. I saw pictures, realia. Yes, very nice indeed. Okay, nice. Okie dokie. Yep, the board, either the board or the data show projector, or some of you have smart boards where you work. Video could be nice. All kinds of things. Even a short story. Okay, well, I like that. The pointer, yes, very nice indeed. So these are all the things I need, and if I was doing a listening, I'd need to have an audio, wouldn't I? And maybe have a backup. So yep, board markers, photocopiers maybe. Yes, very nice indeed. Okay, lovely. So I need to have all these things in my virtual bag or my real bag, however you want to think of it. Okie doke. Let's move along there. Sorry, I just had a little screen freeze. I could fill a bag with these things that could go wrong. It doesn't matter how many years you've been teaching or how wonderful you are as a teacher. Even if you got an A on your CELTA course, mashallah, but you don't, nobody's perfect, right? Things go wrong because you're dealing with people. We live in Egypt, we might have a power cut. Alhamdulillah, it's quite rare these days, but it can happen. So if we've planned a listening or we want to use the data show or the smart board, what on earth are we going to do? And for those of you who teach adult learners, you know that they all arrive at different times because they work on their own timetable, not like kids. When you teach at a school, you walk into class, the kids are already there, whether they're small children, medium-sized children, or bigger children. Okay, adults are on their own timescale. Classroom management. Okay, not a big problem with adults. Most of the time, the biggest problem with adults is perhaps speaking too much in their mother tongue, but that could usually be cured quite quickly. Say, oh my goodness, your Arabic is fantastic. And then, okay, sorry, teacher. Obviously more important when you're teaching younger learners, if you're teaching, kids and teenagers, because they can be very naughty. So you need to be ready to deal with it. And the fact that time, the teacher's enemy, what are you going to do if you start running out of time? Maybe you had to do one part of your lesson twice because the students got stuck. So again, what can you do to make up that time? Do you need to cut anything out? Do you need to extend the last one because you've got too much time? Well, engagement, somebody said engagement can be a problem with older learners. It depends. I mean, I find that adult learners are a lot more engaged because they choose to come to class, but it depends on the situation. If it's a company that's paid for you, for those learners, sometimes they're not engaged because they were forced to go because the company's paid. So that could cause a problem. So it will vary. So yes, engaging your learners, but thinking of what you can do when things go wrong. So timing is a big one. What if you finish a bit early? Can you extend your last task, your last activity? Ben mentioned, maybe dealing with emergent language. That might be a good opportunity. I mean, because again, this all depends on your syllabus and your curriculum at school. So, depending on where you work. If you work at a language center, language school, then there is some kind of pacing schedule. And if you work in a school context, you will have to finish certain things so the students are ready for the exams. So we have to bear all those things in mind as well. So, so we have to think of all the things that can go wrong and all the things that we can do to deal with it. And it doesn't matter if you have a long list, even whether it's in your head or on paper, because this means that you're more prepared. So when things do go wrong, because something always goes wrong, usually it's something small. Once in a blue moon, it's something major. All right, something disastrous. Dopamine overload, I like that. So the more prepared you are, the more likely you are not to panic when it does go wrong. You'll just think, okay, this is part of teaching, because that's exactly what it is. Teaching isn't about perfection. I hear teachers talking all the time that I want my lesson to be perfect. Yarit, yani, mish mumkin. We're not perfect. We're just humans with all our faults, and our students are the same. Things will happen. And, as a friend of mine always says, prepare for success. So if you see things are going wrong, if you've anticipated well, then you're a bit better equipped to deal with it. All right. And as Ben says, there might be something you didn't anticipate. Again, we're only human. We can't remember every single thing. But again, you'll be less stressed if you've already thought about most of the possibilities before your lesson. All right. I'm whizzing through because I know what I'm doing. A lot of what I'm saying is quite easy. And I know that many of you have heard it before. So I don't want to get too sort of, to talk too much about it because a lot of it's very obvious. But these are important reminders. Yeah. Things that, sometimes fall by the wayside when we're in a hurry and stressed. Okay. Yes, there'll be lots of questions going on. Thank you for complimenting my Arabic, even though I know it's rubbish, really. Okay, so let's continue our journey. So, how do we get there? I'm on the bus because I couldn't afford the train. We teachers can't always afford the train, especially if you're a foreigner, because we pay more nowadays in Egypt. So I'm taking the cheap option. I'm on Go Bus. So obviously we have to lead the students in, yes. And many of you mentioned this before, with pictures, with video. It could be anything that you like. The important thing is usually to keep it short and simple. Don't go into these very long, talkative blah, 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 lead-ins, because you just want to get the students into the lesson, all right? You don't have to tell them what the lesson's going to be about unless you teach teenagers. That's another matter. Okay, that's school teaching, and I know why we have to do that, and we can come to that later, perhaps during the question and answer session. For you, most of the time, you want to sort of get their attention, okay? Get them into it rather than just going in and saying, good morning, we are going to do the present perfect simple, right? Okay. And the past simple, right? So we've got subject and verb has, have plus, been plus, past participle, blah, blah, blah. Yalla, let's go on to do some nice boring exercises. Okay. So we want to get the students interested. So maybe some pictures, maybe a video clip, maybe something funny, maybe a clip from an old Egyptian film. Even though it's in Arabic, you can ask a couple of questions in English if it's related to the lesson. Okay. There are zillions of things that you can do. All right. So what's the next stop? So stop one is the lead-in. Warmers and lead-ins. Okay, we'll do with that. A warm-up and lead-ins and warm-ups are often very, very similar, but we'll come back to that. Okay. We could ask them about the weather. You're sounding very British. We love talking about the weather. I did that before we started. I asked my esteemed colleagues on the panel about the weather because I knew that the weather was better in Egypt, so I just wanted to boast. I wanted bragging rights. Okay, so well done. Next stop. Some of you have predicted it already. So yes, the text could be, because as Ben showed you, a text-based lesson, okay? So if we're doing a text-based, we need our text. Obviously, we're going to give them tasks. It could be a quick reading for gist, it could be a reading for specific information, or both. This will also depend on time, aims, a whole host of things. But the text can also help students engage with the lesson, because in this case, it might be a text on traveling and people's experiences, maybe positive and negative. They went to another country and this is, the things that happened to them. Or maybe it's a dialogue where they're telling their friends about it. Okay, so what comes next? Where's my next stop on the bus? A quotation from Hamlet, I love that. Trying to come back to Ben's session. Very good. Okay, Sumia, yes. Inti shatura. Okay. So, yes, the noticing. I've put it all in one stage, just for clarity, for the purpose of clarity, but noticing. So this is where we're focusing on the language, because the text has examples of that target language, right? So it'll have examples of the present perfect simple and probably some examples of the past simple as well. So a noticing task can be a very simple one. It can be just simply underlining all the examples of the present perfect simple. Okay. They don't have to be complicated. The noticing stage is to raise students' awareness. Yes, that's the present perfect simple. Okay, blah, 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 blah. And then we can do some language focus, the parts of speech, highlighting of the form, all those little important bits. Of course, before we do the highlighting, we might need to do some clarification, as in checking meaning, concept checking questions or checking questions. Because it's the present perfect simple, isn't it? Is it past, present, or future? Do we know when it finished? Is it important? Yes, no, and then highlighting. Obviously, the forms go either on your whiteboard, on your projector, whatever. Okay. Somebody threw in the ICQs. I don't need the ICQs just yet because I haven't asked the students to do anything, but I might have needed them during the text stage when I gave the instructions. If I asked them to underline, are you going to write anything? No, teacher. Okay, good. All righty. Now, some of you have already come up with what's coming next. All right. So next stop on the journey. Okay. Many of you know all about this. Sometimes known as restricted practice. It depends on which methodology book you read. So this tends to be the most commonly used term. So the purpose of controlled practice, okay, after we've done all the grammar work, is to actually get the students to practice the language in a very controlled way. There's no creativity here. The purpose is to see how much the students have gained from the language stage of the lesson. Okay, can they now use this accurately? Because that's the focus here. We're focusing on accuracy. We're not worried about creativity. We're not worried about fluency or anything like this. And of course, control practice can take all kinds of forms. It could be a simple question answer. I personally, for doing this lesson, I would do what we call a chain drill. I'd have some cards, with pictures of places, like Fayoum, Sharm el-Sheikh, Alexandria. What else could I have? Some of my favorite places, Luxor, Dahab. Okay, so each picture, then I would just pass it to one student and ask, have you ever been to Dahab? And they'd have to say, yes, I have, no, I haven't. And then that student passes it on to the next student and asks the same question. And then I pass another card, another card, another card. And that's called a chain drill, which is a very controlled practice. So I can get the students speaking immediately. Alternatively, it could be, the good old-fashioned gap fill or the evil multiple choice. Okay. I'm not going to do multiple choice in most cases because I think they're easier for exams. I'm just not a multiple choice person. Okay. So think of that, controlled practice can take many forms. It could even be writing example sentences, maybe using a prompt, it could be choose the correct form. So, I mean, we've seen these a million times. It could be an exercise where they've got two forms of the verb and the students have to just underline the correct one or write in the correct one. So controlled practice, there are all kinds. Gap fills, choose the correct one, basic question answer. I'm trying to think of a few more. And of course, it could be multiple choice, choosing the correct form, if you like those. So there are lots and lots of things that you can do. But usually, again, don't get too complicated. Yes, sentence completion and true false. Somebody just reminded me of true false. Thank you very much, Yasmin.
Or
So
jumbled sentences.
this is for, yes, thank you, Amanda. Yes, so unjumbling, unscrambling the sentences, they're all mixed up. This is a wonderful control practice, isn't it? Okay,
Error correction.
so go on.
Error correction.
Yes. Yeah, correct the incorrect sentences, yeah? See? We've just given you about 5 or 6 there. Anything else you got there, Amanda?
I don't think
No,
I've got
no,
anything
thank
else
you.
now.
Because I just lost my sort of like, oh, look at, and then suddenly those were the 2 I wanted. Those were the most important. See, that's why you have people with you. Teamwork makes the dream work. All righty. So we are going on to our next step of our journey. Okay. So I'm trying to rush a bit because time is always the enemy and we want to keep you awake. So I think you know the last 2 parts because some of you have mentioned them. Okay. All righty. So what's coming next? We've done the controlled. Yay. Okie dokie. So next step on the journey, yes. Freer practice, less restricted, whatever you want to call it, but usually freer practice is the best description. So the aim here now is fluency, isn't it? And what I should have said during control practice, this is where, because the aim is accuracy in control practice, we will correct on the spot. We can do on the spot correction because our focus is accuracy. Okay. Whereas during the freer practice, we want to develop the students' fluency. So in this case, we might ask them to talk about different places that they've been to, whether if they liked it, why not? Because I think the thing that people forget, when you use the present perfect for simple for experience, you then follow up with lots of past tense questions, past simple. So you say, have you ever been to Al Fayoum, for example? Okay, yes, I have. When did you go? Okay, what did you do there? How long did you stay? Who did you go with? What did you think of it? Did you eat any nice food there? All righty. So basically, the present perfect simple in this situation opens the door to a whole load of past simple questions because now we want to know specifics. So the students should be then asking each other lots and lots of past simple questions because the present perfect simple has introduced the idea of the experience and the students can ask lots of follow-up. Somebody has said, yes, what about, they love free practice, but it's often chaotic. Language learning is chaotic. It's a very messy process. We're trying to tidy it up through our lesson plans. Coursebook writers try to tidy it up by saying, first we're going to do the present simple, then we're going to do the present continuous, then we're going to do the future simple, even though the order of language learning doesn't necessarily follow that pattern. I mean, many people would argue that you should start with the past simple because, hey, it's simple. And far easier. There's no he, she, goes, like, loves, blah, 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 all those problems of the third person singular. Okay. Language learning occurs in its own way, doesn't it? I mean, I would argue that British kids, for us, for our exposure to language, one of the things that we first hear is the present perfect simple, because our mummies are saying, have you cleaned your room? Have you brushed your teeth? Have you have you been to the toilet? Have you blah, blah, blah? Have you eaten your food? Have you finished a meal? Okay, so, we're getting all that exposure from day one. Of course, we don't know it's the present perfect simple. I'm not going to say when I'm 5, oh, mummy, you shouldn't be using the present perfect simple because I'm only 5. Okay, the order of language learning is a very chaotic thing. And we should be able to enjoy a bit of chaos in our class as long as you can control it. I'm a great believer in organized chaos. That's probably describes a lot of my life. My desk, actually, if you could see my desk at the moment, it's organized chaos. I know where everything is, but if anybody looked at it now, they'd just go, they'd be quite frightened. So language learning isn't a neat and tidy concept. It is a very nebulous thing, and it sort of goes its own way. We try to sort of tidy it up in the lesson by saying, okay, now you're just going to practice these tenses. But even when we're doing the free practice, the freer practice stage will also bring in other language. Okay, so we say practice this and this, but then students are going to bring in other stuff that they know. And that's a very good thing, because that means they're speaking more naturally, they're becoming more fluent, and that's exactly what we want, isn't it? So think of the teacher's role here, of course. Now the teacher is standing back, okay? So this is where we don't correct, all right? So the teacher would only intervene if the students got stuck and couldn't do it, or you needed to encourage them a bit. Maybe one student's not speaking to the others. Now, with freer practice, I mean, it takes place in different forms because it will depend on your classroom. All right. If you're teaching at a school, you might not have enough room in your class for students to walk around and ask each other. So they can sit at their desks, turn around, speak to the person next to them, turn around, speak to the person behind them. It doesn't have to, involve moving around if that's not practical, or you as a teacher are scared of losing control. That's perfectly okay, and you don't have to feel bad about it. All right. So, it's not a problem, as long as the students practice, it doesn't matter how it happens. Okay, if you've got larger classrooms, then of course the students can walk around, you can play some music, and that really gets the students speaking, because that builds up their confidence. I'm a great believer in having some lively music, if your institution allows it, because we've all got different rules according to where we work. But basically, that's what happens. It's the freer practice. The students are practicing and bringing in other language. This might be an opportunity for the teacher will be taking notes, okay? Because you will be probably looking for mistakes with the target language, in this case, the present perfect simple, maybe the past simple as well, because it's your sub-aim. You might also be recording examples of emergent language, so language that the students started using that you haven't planned for. Okay, because you might want to do some work on it either in that lesson or another lesson. This all depends on time. Okay, that's why I'm keeping it simple. So the students have done all their practice. I've walked around taking notes. So what do we need to do? Very nice. Okay, well done. We need some feedback, don't we? Okay, so our last stop on our journey, and some of you had mentioned this already. So content feedback is very important, because you want to know what the students talked about. Now, we don't want them to tell us, just to say, so what did you say to your friend? Otherwise, they just regurgitate what they just said. And I missed out an important thing when I told them to do the free practice, which was to give them some kind of communicative purpose. So a reason to speak to each other. Perhaps I could ask them to find 3 things the same, 2 things the same, or who had the most interesting experience. Whose experience did you like best? And why. So in the content feedback, we need to show an interest in what the students have said, and do try to look interested. Don't sort of, the student says, yes, he have been Alpha Human, you go, oh, wow. Or you do the opposite, you go, nice. Okay, so don't overdo it, don't underdo it, and say, oh, nice, okay, could you tell me a bit more? All right. So this is where we try and find out what they spoke about, what they found out from each other. Because when you think about real life, if you're asking somebody about a conversation they had with a friend that you say, oh, what did you talk about? Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know about that. That's kind of what we're trying to imitate. Okie dokie. So I'm going to rush through because time is the enemy. And of course, language feedback, which is delayed error correction. All right. Some of you mentioned this already. Well done. So this can take many forms. Probably the nicest way to do it in many ways is to have maybe 2 or 3 examples of good language where they got it right, and then maybe 3 where it went wrong. Okay, so you can say to the students, well done, you did lots of speaking. I just heard a few things. You can either write them on your board or your data show or your smartboard, whatever, and get the students to think about those examples in groups. See, activated their brains a bit and say, okay, I want you to decide which ones are correct and why. And they can tell you, and then you say, okay, so which ones are, incorrect? How can we change them? Also, praise the students for the good examples. Say, these were very good. Somebody used that very nicely and they made quite a long sentence out of it. And then it's bye. Your journey has ended for the lesson. All righty. So bear in mind, we haven't talked about timing because this will all depend on your lesson. Okay. Some people have mentioned things like assessment. Again, this will depend on where you're working and the kind of assessment you need. In this situation, I'm only talking about very basic assessment because from the content and language feedback from the freer practice, I will have been taking notes. Maybe in another lesson, I can do some more work. All right, because depending on what I'm doing, if I've only got 45 minutes, then that's all I have time for now. All right. But if I'm doing a double lesson, maybe a couple of hours, a 2-hour lesson or whatever, then maybe I can continue to do some more work on that emergent language or problems that students were still having with those forms. Okay, so or that might inform my choices for my next lesson for preparation. So there's lots and lots of things to take into account, but these are your basic steps. This is your friend that you take with you, your little bag of things, your 5 main steps. Don't get complicated, your 5/6, okay? Because if you get too complicated, that's usually when things go wrong. Okie dokie. Amanda, would you like to do the skills part or would you like me to carry on?
No, keep going.
Hmm?
Keep going.
All righty. So we've done a language lesson. All righty, like as Ben showed you. All right, and now we're looking at a skills lesson. All righty. Again, as you saw before, very similar steps. So how are we going to start our journey with our skills lesson? We're doing receptive skills. Okay, right. So hold on. So we're starting our journey again. Okay, we're doing a straightforward reading lesson. Very similar to what was mentioned previously. So again, this is our final destination. This is where we want to be. So start from the end, come back. Okay, so your journey is going to go a bit back and forth. All right, what do you think my sub-aim could be? So I'm doing something receptive. Very nice. Okay. Does anybody come up with an idea? That's right, I'm just coming back and forth. Okay. All righty. Oh, some ideas are coming in. Yes, it's receptive. So the text could be anything. I mean, it could be, let's say reading about maybe somebody's travel experiences. It could be using a variety of tenses. Okay. All right. So my assistant on my journey, in this case, we're reading about commuting. So commuting is traveling to work. And in Egypt, I think we've probably got lots of stories about traveling to work, because if you live in Cairo or Alexandria, we have some pretty chaotic traffic. So traveling to work in Egypt is never boring, I think you can say. I certainly find traveling to work in Cairo quite interesting, which is sometimes a British way of saying, but we say it's interesting. But I find it quite funny. Alrighty. So again, very simple steps. So of course I need my main aim. I want the students to read a text about commuting, about, how it makes people feel, what kind of journeys they take. Obviously, I need a lead in. Maybe some pictures of people looking fed up on buses or people packed like sardines on the metro. Maybe people sitting in their cars, beeping their horns and shouting insults at each other. Okay, because these are all different ways of commuting. We all commute in different ways. Some of us take a bus, some of us take a microbus, which is also another exhilarating white knuckle experience. Okay, some people take the metro, some people go by car, either their own car or in a taxi. Either way, things are going to happen. Okay, so this could be your way of. Somebody said, "Picture of me looking at the glass of the bus in despair." And you've also got to have the pedestrians who are also trying to die by crossing the road, which makes things interesting. So it's very easy to find interesting pictures or video clips of a lead-in before you start your reading, right? So off we go. So again, we need our little backpack, our equipment, kiddoke. So we need some stuff. You'll see some serialities. Same, see? This, all these things apply whether you're teaching a skills lesson or a language lesson. Could be a grammar lesson, could be a vocabulary lesson, could be a speaking lesson, could be a writing lesson. You still need to think about that. If you're teaching the same class, then alhamdulillah, you know already who they are. Okay. But if you're a teacher who's rushing between, 4 or 5 different classes, that's a lot to remember. Okay, same thing again. I'm not going to explain this because you already know that part. And I don't want you falling asleep too just yet. Anticipated problems and solutions, again, the text, instructions, tasks, timing, because if you're doing gist and specific information, don't let it go on too long, because if your students are taking 10 minutes to read for specific information, now they're reading intensively, aren't they? And they start panicking about all those words they don't know. All righty. So, okie dokie. Indeed. Yes, we'll be able to. Yes. Also very nice. Okay. Same. Talked about lead-in. Okay. Pictures, video, whatever. Some vocab. All right. So you need to think about what words the students need to be able to do the tasks that you're giving them. So if you're doing reading for gist or reading for specific information, or reading for detail, this all depends on the aim of your lesson. This is usually, the blocking vocabulary that is going to block them from being able to complete the tasks or block them from understanding the main idea. Okay, so this is why it's often called blocking. Okay, lead-in, context setting. To be honest with you, I'm quite lazy. I use lead-in for warm-up, context setting, okay, because I'm going with the KISS rule. All right, keep it short and simple. Don't complicate it. You can call it what you like. It's just like wording your aims. I find it easy for myself to focus on the final destination if I say students will have practiced, but as Amanda has also rightly mentioned, will be able to, which is also another way of, going forward in your journey. So both are right. Okay, so you find the terminology that works for you. Okie dokie. I think that's the best way to do it because, we could argue all night about which one, why you should use this and why not. I think they are both perfectly valid. It's just, I've found the one that works for my old brain. Okay, so you need some vocab. What comes next? What are we going to do now? Are they going to fall asleep? Okay, the usual main idea. And there's lots of jargon with this. Skimming, main idea, gist, okay? Same, okay? All right? So don't get too sort of, tangled up in jargon. They're all pretty much the same thing. Yes, yes. Reading for gist, skimming, main idea, pretty much the same thing. All righty? Okay. Fall asleep reading. So those are the things to just, keep in mind. Don't get too, uptight about it. So what's going to come next? If we've done some reading for gist, so reading for gist usually takes a quite short time, doesn't it? Maybe we have one question, what's the text about? Is it where are they? What kind of, Do you think they know each other very well? I mean, there's a whole host of questions that you can ask. You can even have this is where a multiple choice wouldn't be too bad, you know. So it's a formal conversation, it's an informal conversation. They're talking about the weather. Oh, just some stupid thing like that. Okay, so many, many, many possibilities. Skimmed milk, I like that. So, you know, many, many things. All righty, there are different types of gist task. So, next I'll stop on the journey. Okay, I'm on a nice bus. All right, reading for specific information. All righty, again, jargon. Specific information, scanning. Same. Okay, some teachers prefer to use the word scanning, some say reading for specific information. When I did my CELTA, because I did mine in the dinosaur era, we only talked about reading for specific information. Okay, so it was a long time ago when I did my CELTA. Remember, 1987, when many of you probably weren't born, so because I'm old. So terminology comes and goes. So specific information, scanning, same thing, okay. Alrighty. So this is where you just want students to get little bits of information. They're going to read quickly, okay? And when you're showing them in class, obviously you show them, so because obviously you're not going to say to the students, I want you to read for specific information, because they're just going to sit there going, Eda, teacher, Yani, what are you saying? So again, you read quickly and write short answers. You know, it's very, very important, isn't it? Because some teachers insist on their students writing full sentences. Like, no, please, no. Otherwise, that's a grammar lesson. Yes, old is gold. Thank you. Definitely my favorite teachers now. So, you know, it should be quick, maybe a couple of, this will depend on the length of the text, okay? Because in both cases, we're not looking for detailed understanding, right? So the specific information task could be dates, times, a whole host of things, okay? If you were doing this for a text-based lesson, again, verbs could just, that's also a specific information task. But because we're doing a skills lesson, we're not focusing on language in this particular example. All right, now, depending on time, because I wrote my main aim as gist and specific because I have a short lesson, I've stopped with that. Obviously, if you've got longer, then you can do reading for detail or reading intensively, where students have to read more carefully. All right. So this depends on your time. I've just kept it simple for the purposes of timing and keeping you awake. So the last part, we've done lots of receptive practice. Okay, remember this was mentioned at the beginning. Okay. So, you know, they've done some receptive. So now they need to do something productive. So what could the productive task be? Nice. Okay. So they've received, that's why we call it receptive practice, listening, reading, where we receive. Now in the next part, the students should produce something lovely, good, okay. Either one of those is absolutely fine. Some writing, or some speaking. So it depends on what you want them to do. Now, because this is about commuting, okay, traveling to work, maybe you could have some, you know, questions like what's the strangest commuting experience you've ever had? What's the worst? What was the best? And why? You know, they can talk about how they travel or strange experiences. And again, before the students start speaking to each other, you can ask them to go and find the strangest commuting experience or the funniest one, because everybody has something to say about going to work. I mean, even though I am fortunate enough to be able to travel by taxi, I still see mad things, you know, mad and bad and nice. I mean, sometimes people offer me food, obviously because I'm large, they obviously think I eat all the time, so but I don't eat it in the car just in case it's poisoned, because I'm a bit paranoid. But people give you water sometimes, you know, because Egyptians are super generous and kind. Sometimes you're at the train station, you're lost with your rubbishy Arabic trying to find the place to get the tickets, or, you know, and people have helped me out and have been so friendly and so had a funny chat. So yes, I mean, well, I like that. Yeah, just Egyptians, we feed everyone. I know my kirsch has expanded very beautifully since I came here. Yeah, Andy Kirschini, Mish Kirsch. Um, so, you know, there's a lot to talk about with commuting, because some people have to take 2 or 3 types of transport to get to work, maybe a microbus, a bus, and then another microbus. So plenty of things to talk about. So this one, I think, lends itself more to speaking. All right. Another one might lend itself to writing. Or if you did a writing task, maybe if the text was from a newspaper or an online newspaper about somebody's commuting problem, maybe people could write in comments to the editor as a sort of an online chat type thing. That might be a more interesting writing task. But there are many, many things you can do. I'm staying with the simple one for now. Okay, so we've gone through most of our journey. What's left? What can we do now? Waiting for the clever teachers. Yes, exactly. Biz up to kiddo. Yes. Okay. Now with the receptive skills lesson, the feedback might be mostly, I'm not saying it has to be, but it might be mostly content, you know, like tell me about the strangest commuting experience you heard about, tell me about the funniest one, you know, get different students to tell you a few things about their experience. Now, the reason I put perhaps language, Amanda very wisely reminded me earlier today that we could show good examples of language, okay? Because we might not have exact target language in the lesson, all right? But if the students were using, for example, you know, because the strangest experience they've ever had, some nice examples of the correct present perfect simple use, then let's get them up there, you know, and show the students. Like somebody made some really good sentences. Have a look at these, you know, well done, you know, very correct. You know, so why not celebrate the achievement? Alternatively, I mean, there are many possibilities here, but maybe if you heard a common mistake, you know, where the students, as you were sort of walking around during the productive stage, maybe you heard something that many students kept repeating and you think, okay, I need to deal with this. Okay, doke. So again, if you've got time, then you can deal with all of that. Okay, doke. Okay. So it's all about time and you know, what your focus is, because again it comes back to, you know, your students, you know what you have to do. Now I noticed that some people mentioned things like exit tickets. So exit tickets could you know, be used in either lesson. This also depends on how much time you have, you know, for students to write things that they, you know, something you learned, something you found useful, something you still don't understand. I mean, there are a whole host of things you could do with that, but I'm going to stop there. All right. Because I'm again mindful of time, absolutely panicking about it. So this is where I'm going to just check the chat. All righty. Yes, very nice indeed. Somebody's put farming it out to AI. All right. So let me just get rid of that one. Now I'm going to delay the questions a bit because we promised that we would tell you something that you wanted to know about. Okay. So I've been given this, and let me just stop share. Okay. This is to keep you here so you don't run away just yet. Very crafty. Whoops. All right, thank you. All right, this is something I am going to whiz through, but just focus on the important parts. International House Cairo has come up with a new initiative called Corporate Social Responsibility, and it is aimed at teachers in Egypt. On the basis of us trying to invest more in teachers, investing in their future as teachers and the future of Egyptian education as much as is logistically possible. So this is the initiative. For those who are interested in doing CELTA, okay, and of course the big thing, the main obstacle to doing a CELTA is money. Mafish fulus. We've never have enough fulus, do we? We always want more. So we're offering a partial funding. Okay, so basically taking 15,000 Egyptian pounds off the price. So as you can see, the price will be 30,000 instead of 45,000. Of course, this doesn't include the Cambridge fee because, you know, with the currency crisis problem, we have no choice about that. Okay, so this funding is available on our CELTA courses in November and December. So very important. Shall I ICQ? Which months? Okay. So, of course, this is where we're coming from, because obviously we want teachers to develop and improve themselves. And we'd love to see more teachers doing, you know, more development courses. But of course, not everybody has, you know, CELTA is never cheap, is it? Because we know that, you know, the better teachers we have, the stronger the future is in education. And we know from experience that teaching changes lives, not only for us, but for our students, doesn't it? So if our teachers are well trained, then this helps our students. So we know all this about CELTA. You've seen that a zillion times. But these are our aims, if you like, and where we're coming from. So I'm going to go to the most important part, okay, because this is the stuff you'll want to know about. So it is unfortunately only available to Egyptian teachers, okay? So you have to be Egyptian citizens in order to qualify. All righty. Okay. So this is when you can have it. So we will be making this this presentation available. If you're worried about missing it, feel free to take a photograph, because these are our dates on which this partial funding is available. Okay, so full-time November, full-time online. So there's the face-to-face at the beginning, online, part-time face-to-face, and part-time online. Okay, so I hope you've all got a photo of that. Sorry to whiz through. I like that. Somebody said, can I go back in time in July and take it, get the discount? Sorry, I know these things happen, don't they? All righty. So basically, this is your chance to apply. So if you are accepted, basically you can apply until the 30th of October. So the deadline's not far away, 2 or 3 weeks. All right. Or until we filled all the places, because it is a first come, first served. All right. So if you're interested and you want to save yourself a bit of money, then you know where to get the information. Fill in the application form with the pre-interview task, write it nicely without using AI, all right? Because we know, we detect it. And if you're accepted, then you can qualify for the discount. All righty. So most important, it's a one-off at the moment. Okay. As you know, it's not been offered before. You know that IH usually does one scholarship a year at Nile TESOL. And because of the price, obviously, we're not going to give it to everybody, because at the end of the day, somebody has to make some money. Anyway, we want our boss to make money so he can pay us. So it's a win-win for us too. Otherwise, we don't have any work. So yes, it is limited. So don't waste any time. This is the most important part. You've got the QR code, you've got the link. All right. Sorry for whizzing through that, but again, mindful of time. So I hope everybody's got that information. Okay. Oh, now they're asking about the Delta. Yes, it is. Remember, it is only available for Egyptian citizens. So you have to be Egyptian. I'm sorry about that. Maybe it'll expand one day, but for the moment, we can only offer it to Egyptians. Okay. All righty. So I'm going to stop there. And Simon's waiting. So sorry about that.
Thank you very much. No, I'm not waiting at all. I'm just enjoying everything that you've been sharing with us, and fantastic sense of humor the whole way through that session. I was just wondering if we could put a whole course together around food and traveling. I think you could maybe learn a language just using those two topics.
Most interesting things, aren't they?
There are some questions for you, Laura, in the Q&A. Amanda has been very active in the chat.
Oh, she's been amazing.
Yes, and she does want to she said that she wants to answer one question in particular.
Yes.
So maybe we'll This is it better to explain the meaning of vocab first or ask them to have a quick look at it to highlight the difficult words and try to guess the meaning through the context? So Amanda, would you like to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I would. I was going to actually type the answer, but I realized that I hit the wrong button, so that's why. But of course, I'm happy to
I've done that
answer it
before.
live. I think, yeah, in your question, you mentioned about explaining vocabulary. I think explaining is a word that we should try to get rid of out of our own vocabulary, because what we don't want to be doing is explaining things to students. What we should be doing is asking them questions, eliciting things from them, showing them pictures, for example, to help them to understand what the words are. Or yeah, if they're words that we want them to be thinking about are in the text, then letting them see them in the text, try to guess maybe what they mean. So I think, yeah, there are all sorts of different ways that we can approach vocabulary teaching, but I think the one thing that we should probably avoid is explaining.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Amanda. Laura, have you had a chance to have a look through the Q&A? Are there any particular questions
Yes, I'm
that
just
stand out
having a look
being
now.
useful?
Actually, one of the questions that keeps cropping up, and it's a question that teachers always ask. Are you they're asking about the certificate of attendance? The answer is yes. Stop panicking. Okay, Nefes? Yes. There will be a lovely Cambridge certificate. So you can dance around the house or do some ululating. Okay. So the answer to that is most definitely yes. Somebody asked a very important question. I mean, this is of course, because this is somebody who's teaching children. So I'm quite happy to answer this one, how to start with children who are 5 without any background. Okay, so this is what we call nursery school or kindergarten. All righty. So this is classic language acquisition, because children of that age, because they're kind of nearly, some of them are toddlers, aren't they, really? They're not going to learn anything. They are going to absorb, acquire, as you do when you're acquiring your mother tongue from your mummy and daddy as a baby, yes? So we're not going to be doing any writing. We're not going to be doing any reading. But what you can do with the little ones is you can do little action games. You can do nursery rhymes. You know, you can use lots of pictures and toys, you know, like a teddy. In fact, if I'd known that, I'd have got my toys out because I've got lots of toys. Because one of things that Amanda and I like doing is teaching children. You can do a lot with toys. You can have a puppet that helps the children to speak. So the puppets are, hello, my name's, I've got one called, I've got Horace the hippo. So my name's Horace. What's your name? And they go, name. They go, okay, good. And then Horace can give you a little cuddle or a kiss or whatever, depending on the COVID situation. I sanitize my puppets just in case. All righty. So lots of silly things like that. Pictures, you know, jumping around. You know, you can have your flashcards on the floor. Let's say you've taught some food, for example. So show some pictures of flashcards of food. Hold it up. Apple, orange. Okay. All together, everybody. Apple. Okay, everybody. Do this with 3 or 4 words because remember, cognitive overload. They're small children. The brain's not, you know, it can't absorb too much. Okay. Then you can hand them out to the kids. They can hold them up and the rest have to say the name of the fruit. Okay. You can put them on the floor. Okay. Get the kids to stand up and they have to jump on the correct card. Okay. This is quite good because they end up in a little puddle. So you shout, come on, and they all go, and they try to jump on the card. All righty. So little things like this, very simple things. You don't need much because, as I said, cognitively they're not, you know, necessarily ready to go down the sort of whole big sentence road just yet. Starting with phrases, chunks of language. Okay. I like. So once you've done your little vocabulary, then you can have, I like apples. I like oranges. Banana. I don't like bananas. Okay. Body language, gestures. Okay. So, start small, keep it short and simple, because they're going to be scared, especially if they don't have any English at all. Luckily, in Egypt, actually, we have English all around us, especially if you come from a big town or city. I know that might be different in the countryside, but one of the things, I mean, Amanda and I are always complaining about this, why our Arabic is so bad. It's because so many people speak English, and it's made us a bit lazy. And everything around you, shops are written in English and Arabic. So it's not like we don't have exposure. It is around us in Egypt. It's a bit like the Gulf. So our students aren't completely unaware. So cartoons, flashcards, and so on. All right. I'm sorry I can't give you a more detailed answer, but look at the curriculum because that's important. And you should be able to incorporate those simple activities within your curriculum. Okay. Like I said, I could only give you a very vague answer because I don't know your curriculum and I don't know what you have to have the things you have to cover. Okay. All righty.
Thank you, Laura. I just want we don't have an awful lot of time, as you say, is the enemy.
Yes,
And we're already 10 minutes over, but I just wondered
indeed.
if Ben, you've seen any of the questions that you'd like to
Yes.
answer in the Q&A.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just address a question about student-centered teaching. So I can
Yes.
see there's a question there about asking just, are these lesson planning strategies that we've looked at today applicable if we're trying to make our lessons more student-centered? And the answer is yes. So if you want to make your lesson more student-centered, I think when planning, you need to ask yourself for each task that you're including in each stage, how can I get the students, the learners to do more? How can I step back and get the students to do more of that work? It could be simply, for example, in a clarification stage, not explaining, as we touched on earlier, or telling the students about the language, but eliciting from them. How does the language work? And take advantage of what you have in the classroom. If you've used a text-based presentation, ask them questions about that context in which the language has been presented in order to help them along with that. It could be getting the students to help each other more, giving them tasks and then making sure that they have opportunities to help each other understand the language before you then check with the class as a whole. There's always just little techniques, little strategies you can do to incorporate more learner involvement in the lesson. Another way you could make your lessons more student-centered would be just to allow a lot more student agency in the lesson. Perhaps, for example, using choice boards, giving your learners a choice over what activities to do. So, for example, if you, let's say, have taught some language and you have already done some controlled practice, you're fairly confident that the learners more or less get that language, well, why not give them some options? You could allow some learners to do a freer practice task involving writing. Others could do speaking in the form of a short discussion. Others could perhaps prepare a short monologue. And that way, you're allowing not just for the students to take more sort of agency and control over their learning, you're also making your lesson a lot more student-centered. So there's just some ideas for you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Do we have any sort of, I know that we're already 13 minutes over, but is there any sort
Oh,
of
sorry, yes.
anything burning that anyone wants to say at this point? Laura?
Somebody has asked, hang on a minute, I'm just blah 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 blah. Hang on a minute. I think we've answered some of those questions indirectly. I think that's okay. Somebody did ask about the course being suitable for those teaching the very young learners, as in the KG. CELTA wasn't designed for that. So I don't want you to spend your money on a course, you know, that won't help you. I mean, a few of the techniques you can use with younger learners, but it wasn't designed for that. So we're not going to take your money and say, this is going to help you be a better nursery school KG teacher. Okay. There are specialized courses for that. So please keep your money for that. All righty. Because we don't want you to invest a lot of money in something that's not going to be helpful to you. All
Yeah,
right.
it's very important to point
The
that
things
out.
we do on CELTA are hopefully, sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay, for teenagers and adults. Okay, I'll stop there. I'm so sorry, Simon.
No, that's fine. It's really important to be clear about these things because we did have something called the CELT P and the CELT S,
Yes.
which were great, but unfortunately they don't exist anymore.
And the extension course, remember?
Yeah.
The
So
YL extension.
So it is the A in ELTA is for adults, but as you say, Laura, it can be used perfectly well for teaching teenagers too. We're gonna wrap it up now because we're quarter past the hour. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Thank you for all the participants for joining in and being so enthusiastic in the chat. This has been really rich and I'm sure has added value to a lot of us here. So thank you all. Thank you, International House, and
Thank you very much.
see you again, hopefully.
Yes. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Simon. Been amazing to work with you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Have a
Yeah,
lovely
thank you,
evening.
everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.